Hello, book lovers and English learners. Today I'm doing a short video that I didn't have the chance to do before. First of all, Happy New Year, everyone. This is the 8th of January 2025, and I'm delighted to wish you a beautiful bookish new year, and I hope you had a wonderful time over the Christmas holidays and that now you're ready for this new year. And I hope that you'll be able to join us for our new live read along for January and February. This is a new book that we are starting this month, and this is an original text. So from next week, we will start reading It Ends With Us, which was written by Colleen Hoover. You probably heard of the release of the film last year, and everything around the film. But I would like you maybe to put this aside and just forget about the whole drama around the film and go back to the book. I'm sure that it's going to be, if whether you have watched the film or not, I'm sure this is going to be a very different experience, and that it will make you forget about the whole thing and just focus on the story and on the writing style of Colleen Hoover and on this bestseller book, and understand why this is a bestseller book. So we're going to read this book. I watched the film, and that made me want to propose this book for the book club. And I'm as curious as you are to see the differences and how the film adapted the story. But obviously, books are much more detailed and have a deeper insight of the characters and the storyline as a whole. So just try to have a more objective eye on this one. If you didn't really like the whole thing around the film, just put that on the side and just focus on the book and why. And let's read it together, of course. So you can join, of course, on joining clicking in the link in the description of this video. Join the book club, and then you will see the whole schedule on my website page, the whole schedule of the live reading sessions. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you will get the free Zoom link to attend the live reading sessions if you're not on Instagram. So because the live sessions are also broadcasted are also live on Instagram. So I'm basically live on Zoom and Instagram. So if you prefer the intimacy of Zoom, then bear in mind that it's recorded, because then I will upload the video on YouTube. So if you want to hide your face, then do it. But bear that in mind that it's recorded. So yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say, just as a little introduction. So this video is about my 8 favorite extract from the book we have read last month, Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. So my favorite extract are from the original text, as we have read an adaptation of the book, the B1 adaptation of the book, which is here. We have read this one last month. You can find all the videos here on YouTube on the playlist section of the book, and I will add this video as well. So today I'm going to read my favorite nuggets, I would say, my favorite extract from this book. And this way will give you an idea of the writing style of Jane Austen and the level of English that you need to master or to be able to, or to be comfortable with to read the original text. So this is what's you should expect when you, if you want to read the book in its original text. So I think that that can be a good that video can give you a good idea of what it's like to read an original text written in the early 18th century, the early 19th century, sorry, late 18th century. So my first quote, there are so many, but I had to select just some of them, and I selected 8, so it's quite a lot already. So my first one is page 55 from this adaptation, which is chapter 11. No matter the edition that you have, it's chapter 11. Not chapter 11. What am I saying? Chapter 2, chapter 10. Yeah, chapter 11. Yeah, I'm right. So it's the beginning of the novel. And this passage is Eleanor who is, so here's the narrator talking, but as we know, Jane Austen loved using the free and direct discourse. So it's the narrator's voice, but this narrator is also, it knows everything that's happening in Eleanor's head at this in this passage. So it's very much Eleanor thinking about the feeling feelings about Mrs. Jennings. She at this point is having she has to endure Mrs. Jennings' endless chats, and there is a lot of humor as she does so brilliantly, as Austen does brilliantly. Neither Lady Middleton nor Mrs. Jennings could supply to her the conversation she missed, although the latter was everlasting talker. So the latter is Mrs. Jennings. Um, was an everlasting talker, and from the first, Lady Middleton had regarded her with a kindness which ensured her a large share of her discourse. She had already repeated her own story to Eleanor 3 or 4 times, and had Eleanor's memory been equal to her means of improvement, she might have known very early in their acquaintance all the particulars of Mr. Jennings' last illness, and what he said to his wife a few minutes before he died. Lady Middleton was more agreeable than her mother, only in being more silent. This is brilliant. Here she's so Eleanor is actually enjoying more the company of Lady Middleton because she doesn't speak. And that's perfect because those two ladies are just unbearable. Although those are very loving characters, especially Mrs. Jennings. She doesn't mean uh, wrong. I mean, she doesn't do things to hurt people on purpose. It's just her nature. She's very talkative. She likes to talk about herself or to play the matchmaker. And Lady Middleton is very self-centered, but more quiet. so which is quite agreeable. Second extract or quote that I really liked reading, that I really enjoyed when I was reading, is the moment where Marion takes Edward Ferrars for Willoughby. So Willoughby and Marion have met already, and it's the point where Edward is visiting Barton after some time. They haven't seen each other, and Marion thinks that it's Willoughby visiting. She walked eagerly. She walked eagerly on as she spoke, and Eleanor. So they are outside having a walk, and Eleanor in the countryside, and Eleanor to screen Marion from particularities, as she felt almost certain of its not being Willoughby, quickened her pace and kept up with her. They were soon within 30 yards of the gentleman. Marion looked again. Her heart sunk within her, and abruptly turning around, she was hurrying back when the voices of both her sisters were raised to detain her. A third, almost as well known as Willoughby's, joined them in begging her to stop, and she turned round with surprise to see and welcome Edward Ferrars. He was the only person in the world who could, at that moment, be forgiven for not being Willoughby. The only one who could have gained a smile from her. But she dispersed her tears to smile on him, and in her sister's happiness, forgot for a time her own disappointment. So at this point, it's when Willoughby has left Devonshire. So he announced a couple days before, or a week, I can't remember the time frame, but he announced that he had to go to London on business, and that he didn't know how long he would stay there. He didn't know that how when he will be able to come back. Uh, so Marion at this point is desperate to see Willoughby reappear at Barton, and she is disappointed, but not so much because she likes Edward Ferrars, so that compensates the loss. But you can feel that he's definitely not the one that she expected, and she's so um, eager to see Willoughby that she's so desperate to for this man to be Willoughby that she's so heartbroken when but not so much. Uh, so she forgives Edward for not being Willoughby. Now, extract number 3. So this is a quote. Oh, sorry. So I forgot. Quote number 2 was chapter 16, right? I will add all the quotes, the pages of the quotes in the description of the video, so that you have a little guide if you want to find those quotes, if you like them as well. Quote number 3, it is Eleanor's again observing Mr. Palmer's character in relation to his wife and other people. And this character, Mr. Palmer, is not such an unlovable character. Is so pompous and full of vanity that he's not really likable. And so it's the narrator talking here. Uh, and revealing Eleanor's thoughts on Mr. Palmer. Eleanor was not inclined, after a little observation, to give him credit for being so genuinely and unaffectedly ill-natured or ill-bred as he wished to appear. So ill-natured or ill-bred means that he's not well, he hasn't been well raised. He doesn't have good manners. He's rude. He is not well educated in a sense. Yeah. His temper might perhaps be a little soured by finding, like many others of his sex, that through most unaccountable bias in favor of beauty, he was the husband of a very silly woman. But she knew that this kind of blunder was too common for any sensible man to be lastingly hurt by it. It was rather a wish of distinction, she believed, which produced his contemptuous treatment of everybody and his general abuse of everything before him. So he's bullying people. He's a bully. The motive was too common to be wondered at, but the means, however they might succeed by establishing his superiority in ill breeding, were not likely to attach anyone to him except his wife. So nobody likes him. Nobody can really like him except his wife. So really like the way he's being described here. A little hint of sarcasm. Now, quote number 4. So that was chapter 20. Now, chapter 22, it's a quote that I particularly enjoy because it shows how overwhelmed Eleanor is by her own emotions, finding out that Lucy has Lucy is the girl. Lucy is the girl that Edward has a lock of hair of. Because here is the passage where Lucy reveals Eleanor that she gave Edward a lock of her hair. So at this point, Eleanor knows about Lucy and, well, the engagement between Edward and Lucy. So here we go. I gave him a lock of my hair. So it's at the end of chapter 22. I gave him a lock of my hair set in a ring when he was along Staple last, and that was some comfort to him, he said, but not equal to a picture. Perhaps you might notice the ring when you saw him. Yes, you did. I did, said Eleanor, with a composure of voice under which was concealed an emotion and distress beyond anything she had ever felt before. An emotion and distress beyond anything she had ever felt before. She was mortified, shocked, confounded. Fortunately for her, they had now reached the cottage, and the conversation could be continued no further. I like that passage here. After sitting with them a few minutes, the Miss Steeles returned to the park, and Eleanor was then at liberty to think and be wretched. So I like this idea that luckily they were reaching the cottage, so that was the end of their discussion, and she could finally be be on your own and uh, not having to bear Lucy Steele's um, conversation. uh, and and sob really and cry, have a good cry and feel miserable at this point, and yeah, have a time for herself to digest the news. Now, quote number 5 is chapter 31. And it's at the very beginning of the chapter. It's the following page. And so this quote now is um, Marian again being full of hope for of having news from Willoughby. Instead, it's a letter. They're in London at this point, and instead, they're receiving a letter from their mother. And Marion is at this point full of hope to that the letter is from Willoughby, apologizing for not visiting her. And here we can see that her imagination is running wild. Now, my dear, I bring you something that I'm sure will do you good. So Mrs. Jennings is very positive, but this is not exactly what Marian expected. So Mrs. Jennings is not being very discerning here. She's completely um, um, out of context, or out of she's uh, um, how to say, she doesn't really understand Marian's expectation here. Marian heard enough in one moment. Her imagination placed before her a letter from Willoughby, full of tenderness and contrition, explanatory of all that had passed, satisfactory, convincing, and instantly followed by Willoughby himself, rushing eagerly into the room to enforce at her feet by the eloquence of his eyes the assurance of his letter. The work of one moment was destroyed by the next. The handwriting of her mother, never till then unwelcome, was before her, and in the acuteness of the disappointment which followed such an ecstasy of more than hope, she felt as if, till that instant, she had never suffered. So I think at this point, they have met Willoughby at the dance. Yes. And she actually received a letter from him saying that he's engaged to someone else. So she hopes that all of this is all a nightmare. It's well, not true, and that Willoughby has changed his mind, or that he's not engaged anymore, and that he made a mistake. And now he's sending a message to apologize and everything, and she expects him to come to be there at the door as well, to make sure that she received the letter, and throwing himself into her arms. But this is all her imagination here, and instead it's her mother's letter. And at this particular moment, it's interesting to really feel that for a nanosecond or something, she um, did not suffer because she imagined that it was him and everything was a whole nightmare and that didn't happen, fortunately. So it's quite um, uh, heartwarming here, or you feel really sorry for Marion, yeah, and yeah, that's why I like it. It's very powerful, as Marion feels very powerfully, very deeply in her way to live. So that was chapter in the quote was in chapter 31. Now let's move on to quote number 6, which is in chapter 33. And it's roughly at the middle of the yeah of the chapter. And at this point, um, John, it's a very funny quote here because this whole chapter is basically John Dashwood complaining about the fact that he doesn't have enough money, that he has a lot of expenses. But at the same time, he's congratulating himself because he invested his money to become even more rich. And I selected this passage because here John Dashwood is congratulating Eleanor for having a rich friend as Mrs. Jennings, and we can really see John Dashwood's true nature, um, and the fact that he's only interested in money, and whether if through other relatives or his way to interact with people always have um, um, an underlying interest, which is money, especially when he knows that the people and he's talking to are rich and wealthy. Wealthy and have status as well. Very important. So, having now said enough to make his poverty clear and to do away the necessity of buying a pair of earrings for each of his sisters, in his next visit at Gray's, he thought Gray's is a jewelry shop and doesn't even cross his mind to buy any presents to his sisters, half sisters. His thoughts took a cheerfuler turn, and he began to congratulate Eleanor on having such a friend as Mrs. Jennings. She seems a most valuable woman indeed. Her house, her style of living, all bespeak an exceeding good income, and it is an acquaintance that has not only been a great use to you hitherto, but in the end may prove materially advantageous. Her inviting you to town is certainly a vast thing in your favor, and indeed it speaks altogether so great a regard for you that in all probability when she dies you will not be forgotten. She must have a great deal to leave. And then his imagination also runs right here. Eleanor stops him very quickly when she tells him that I don't think that if Mrs. Jennings dies, um, um, she would give us anything because she has her own children to inherit any wealth or property that she has. Don't think that we will be on the list. So she is more realistic than him, um, more lucid, and 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 here we can see that is John is only interested in Eleanor and Marion because they know wealthy people, and he actually invites himself to Mrs. Jennings' house in London and to the Middleton's house as well. So he's very forward in his intentions to get to know these people, and he's just terrible. He's just he's at some point, even in the novel, we can feel that Eleanor and Marion are so ashamed of him. Although he is wealthy, he doesn't know how to behave. He's just um, a joke, really. Um, he's not ill-natured because he has some kindness deep down because of his upbringing uh, with the girls, and when he was younger, there are still um, um, some leftovers of kindness, but not that much really. They're brief moments, really. Now, next extract and quote that I like. So, quote number 7, which is chapter 44, towards the end of the novel. Here, this is a passage where we, oh, no, it's not here. We have the discussion between Eleanor and Willoughby. So Willoughby is visiting Cleveland, so the house where um, Eleanor and Marion. So the at this point in the novel, Marion and Eleanor are visiting Mrs. Palmer, so the Palmers in Cleveland, because Mrs. Palmer just gave birth, and they want to go home, and Cleveland is on their way to Barton, back to the house. And Marion has fell ill, and Willoughby heard of it, and he came to Cleveland to meet to see how Marion is. But there he just meets Eleanor, and he wants to make amends and apologize in a way, but it's not very. It's just to kind of he's putting himself as a victim more like, and I like this particular passage, although Eleanor is feels at the end of her discussion with him, she feels sorry for him about his situation, his financial situation, that he didn't have any other choice than marry this wealthy woman. But on the other hand, he's full of himself. She realizes that he's full of himself and very selfish, and here she kind of put him at his place and defends Miss Gray, so the woman he just married, because just above that passage, he's criticizing the woman that is kindly marrying him. Although he is handsome, so he knows that he can get away with everything. So Eleanor is defending Miss Gray here as Willoughby is being disrespectful towards her, and basically she's telling him that he should take take responsibility of his own actions instead of blaming everyone else. So here, you're very wrong, Mr. Willoughby. Very blamable, said Eleanor, while her voice, in spite of herself, betrayed her compassionate emotion. You ought not to speak in this way. You should not. You ought is stronger than should. You must not. Yeah. You ought not to speak in this way either of Mrs. Willoughby or my sister. So Mrs. Willoughby is the former Sophia Gray. You have made your own choice. It was not forced on you. Your wife has a claim to your politeness, to your respect, at least. She must be attached to you, or she would not have married you. To treat her with unkindness, to speak of her slightingly, is no atonement to Marian, nor can I suppose it a relief to your own conscience. That doesn't need to blame everyone else and your wife more specifically. Be responsible of your own action and own your mistake or your choices. Be responsible of your choices instead of blaming others. You're the only one to blame. And final quote. Also, make sure you give me your comment about the quotes that I've selected. Let me know what you think about these quotes as well. I'd love to know your your opinion on them. Now the final one, chapter quote number 8, is chapter 48. So not the last. Yeah, there are 50 chapters in this novel, so it's at the very end. And here it's a lovely extract that I'm going to read here. It's at the end, the last paragraph, the very end of chapter 48. And at this moment, Edward reveals that it is his brother who is now married to Lucy Steele and not him. And Eleanor is in a complete shock, as you can imagine. Perhaps you do not know, you may not have heard that my brother is lately married to the youngest, to Miss Lucy Steele. His words were echoed with unspeakable astonishment by all but Eleanor, who sat with her head leaning over her work in a state of such agitation as made her hardly know where she was. Yes, said he, they were married last week and are now at Dawlish. Eleanor could sit no longer. She almost ran out of the room, and as soon as the door was closed, burst into tears of joy, which at first she thought would never cease, never stop. Edward, who had till then looked anywhere rather than at her, saw her hurry away and perhaps saw or even heard her emotion. As we know, Eleanor is very private. She doesn't show any emotion. And here, finally, we see Eleanor feeling something and expressing by her action feelings. And it's so beautiful the way that she writes, perhaps saw or even heard her emotion. Okay. And this shows the power of this moment and the strength and the deep feelings that Eleanor has for Edward, because you can even hear. It's so loud. For immediately afterwards, he fell into a reverie, a dream, which no remarks, no inquiries, no affectionate address of Mrs. Dashwood could penetrate. His loss is in his own thinking, and perhaps realizes at this point that, right, she might have feelings for me now. That kind of confirm Eleanor's feelings towards him. And at last, without saying a word, quitted the room and walked out towards the village, leaving the others in the greatest astonishment and perplexity on a change in his situation. He's now single. So wonderful and so sudden, a perplexity which they had no means of lessening but by their own conjectures. Conjectures mean speculation, guesses. They try to imagine what could happen next. So what happens is that he goes to the village to get a ring to propose Eleanor, of course. So this is the end of this little video about my favorite extracts from this book, and that closes the Sense and Sensibility literary journey that we've had this whole month of December, and now we can enter a new reading season, a new chapter or a new session of reading in the book club with the reading of It Ends With Us. This Saturday, I will host a new live podcast, a new live podcast on Colleen Hoover, and a podcast introducing, Colleen Hoover and the novel It Ends With Us. So this way you'll get to know more about the author, her multiple novels, and her writing work, of course, her writings, but more specifically, we will focus on It Ends With Us, of course. If you want to join the live podcast, then subscribe to the newsletter. And if you want to get the latest videos, then subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Bye.